Good evening, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. Ukraine and Russia signed a deal Friday that will allow Kiev to resume grain exports from Black Sea ports. The Department of Foreign Affairs said no Filipino casualty has so far been reported amid the blistering heat wave sweeping across Europe. President Marcos Jr. is very busy preparing for his first State of the Nation address, which will be delivered at the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City on Monday. And is it tumbleweed, a piece of fishing line, spaghetti? A tangled object discovered by NASA's Mars Perseverance rover has intrigued space watchers. First in our news, Ukraine and Russia signed a deal that will allow Kiev to resume grain exports from Black Sea ports. Many countries rely on Ukrainian grain, and the war sparked a global food crisis. Let's listen in.
Today, there is a beacon on the Black Sea, a beacon of hope, a beacon of possibility, a beacon of relief in a world that needs it more than ever. And let there be no doubt, this is an agreement for the world. It will bring relief for developing countries on the edge of bankruptcy and the most vulnerable people on the edge of famine. And it will help stabilize global food prices, which were already at record levels even before the war, a true nightmare for developing countries. This is an unprecedented agreement between two parties engaged in bloody conflict. But that conflict continues, and people are dying every day, and fighting is raging every day.
Bugün Rusya ve Ukrayna tarafıyla İstanbul'da atmakta olduğumuz bu müşterek adımın barışa yönelik umutları canlandıracak yeni bir dönüm noktası olmasını canı gönülden diliyorum.
Now, this agreement could avert a global food crisis. It should help ease the acute hunger that the UN estimates say now faces an additional 47 million people because of the war. Russia's naval blockade of Black Sea ports have trapped more than 20 million tons of grain, while the war has destroyed silage crops, contributing to a spike of food prices globally. The United Nations says 394 million people, many in Africa, are now marching to the brink of starvation. Before the war, Ukraine is one of the world's biggest wheat exporters, called the breadbasket of Europe. Russia has been accused of using hunger as a weapon of war, which Moscow denies. Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu told Kremlin state media after attending the signing ceremony that he expected the deal to start working in the next few days. He also pointed out that Russia had managed to secure a separate pledge from Washington and Brussels to lift all restrictions on its own grain and other agricultural exports. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Ministry's website said that Russia hopes that parties to this grain export agreement would make all efforts to implement the deal. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said it's unacceptable that the United States and its allies use food production for the benefit of their geopolitical enterprises. Let's listen in.
Использование Соединенными Штатами и их союзниками продовольствия в интересах геополитических авантюр неприемлемо и бесчеловечно. Подписание меморандума Россия-ООН лишний раз подчеркивает абсолютно искусственный характер предпринимавшихся попыток Запада свалить на Россию вину за проблемы с поставками зерна на мировые рынки.
According to the TASS news agency, the Russian top diplomat specified that the Russian UN memorandum signed as a part of the deal would remain valid for 3 years. And its main goal was to ensure transparent and unhindered shipments of Russian food and fertilizers, including the raw materials for their production to international markets. In particular, Lavrov said this issue is about removing the obstacles that the U.S. and the EU have created in finance, insurance, and logistics, and exempting these particular products from the restrictive measures imposed on Russia. Russia, Turkey, and Ukraine are the parties to the Ukrainian Grain Transport Initiative, with the United Nations acting in a support role. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky lauded the landmark deal between Ukraine and Russia aimed at unblocking Ukrainian Black Sea grain exports and alleviating the global food crisis.
Сьогодні наша держава і весь цивілізований світ досягли важливої домовленості. Є угода, яка дозволяє розблокувати українські порти і відновити український аграрний експорт. Близько 20 мільйонів тонн минулорічного врожаю зернових підуть на експорт. Цьогорічний врожай, а він вже збирається, також можна буде реалізувати. Це доходи фермерів, усього аграрного сектору і державного бюджету. Це робочі місця, це кошти для посівної наступного року. У нас зараз вже в наявності зерна приблизно на 10 мільярдів доларів.
Meanwhile, Russian expert Nikolai Petrov said that the deal signed in Istanbul to unblock Ukraine's Black Sea grain exports is very important to Ukraine's economy, but that it could break any time and that Russia will not allow this grain to be exported without getting something serious in exchange. Again, let's listen in.
It's understandable where interests of the international community, Turkey, and Ukraine are. It's not that easy to understand what Russian leadership is eager to get out of this deal. As we know, it goes about safety or protection of Ukrainian ports on the Black Sea. And this is one of major Russian army targets. So I think that the deal in general is very fragile. It can break any time in future due to different reasons, or Russia can stop it using certain things as pretext. And I think it's symbolic that from the Ukrainian side, it was the Minister of Infrastructure who did sign the deal, and from Russian side, it was the Minister of Defense. So what we see is weaponization of different spheres, like energy with regard to Russian supply to Europe, and like grain. And this is very understandable lever Russian leadership is trying to use in order to get certain benefits. So Russia was claiming for certain sanctions to be lifted or to be softened. So far, we do not know exact details of this deal, but it's understandable that Russian leadership is not interested in allowing this grain to go out without getting something serious in exchange.
Over 50 million people in Eastern Africa will face acute food insecurity this year. That is according to a new study backed by the World Food Program and the Food and Agriculture Organization. Let's listen in.
So the message that I really want to send this evening is that time is running out. Funding is required. We have the capacity to respond only if we have the levels of funding required. And it's forcing us to make very tough choices already. We're effectively taking from the hungry to feed the starving. And at this time, we cannot forget about Eastern Africa and the populations affected by this drought. The drought has already had 3 failed rainy seasons, and we are approaching the 4th. In fact, we are now halfway through it. Originally, the estimates of the number of people affected at the beginning of this year was between 13 and 14 million. We now estimate this has increased to 15 to 16 million, And if the rains fail, or if they are below average, then this number could increase to 20 million. So we have a very real risk of famine. This is happening at a time when the level of food insecurity across the region has increased dramatically. We are now estimating that 81 million people across Eastern Africa and the Horn are food insecure. This is a 60% increase since June 2021. What's causing it? It's a combination of ongoing conflicts, and I've spoken to you previously about Tigray. It's the climate effect, it's the droughts, and also the flooding. We're also now seeing the macroeconomic impacts of COVID. Now we're seeing a spike in the cost. Some of this is related to Ukraine, as you know. Others are due to other factors such as rising fuel prices.
We anticipate a sharp increase in commodity prices starting from August 2022. We expect a 30% increase in rice, a 67% increase for the price of wheat flour, and a staggering 70% increase in the price of vegetable oil. At the back of our minds as well is the impact that fuel, which is out of reach, high transport costs, is having on our own operations. Now, because we are struggling as well as an agency, what that means is that our teams on the ground are making last-ditch efforts to pre-position food into deficit areas. Now, pre-positioning is when we move food in advance of the lean season and the rainy season, which cuts access to nearly half the country.
Issued by the region's Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the IGAD or IGAD Regional Focus on Food Crisis Report sounded the alarm over escalating food insecurity and malnutrition in Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. They also stressed the need to start preparing and responding to the increasingly inevitable disruptions that climate change will cause in the future. And now to the brutal heat wave in the U.S. It has turned deadly as tens of millions of Americans still facing dangerous temperatures into the weekend. Take a look.
I'm trying to give her a lot of comfort by cooling her whole body. And this is an ice cold water that I put it on the freezer for a long time.
Yeah, I was just looking at the weather map all across America, and like Austin, Texas, the high is 100 plus every day, but the world is burning. It's not getting cooler right now, and it's pretty frightening.
Whew, it's been really hot this whole week, and I don't usually turn on my air conditioner. It's just expensive right now. So I have a little fan, and it's been hard. I sit in front of the freezer a lot.
We're making it through.
And ice cold showers, and a lot of ice cream.
And so far this week, 60 daily high temperature records have been tied, broken as dangerous heat envelop much of the nation. That is according to the National Weather Service in a tweet on Thursday morning. Temperatures in large parts of the southwest U.S. have soared to over 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius, topping 110 degrees in some areas. Similar levels were recorded across the U.S. South, where humidity compounded the discomfort. The NWS tweeted on Tuesday that 100 million people were under heat-related warnings and advisories, and said on Thursday that a significant portion of the population would remain under such warnings over this weekend. Washington and Philadelphia have both declared heat emergencies and warned their residents to remain vigilant, stay hydrated, limit sun exposure, and check on seniors' neighbors' pets. According to Washington Boston Mayor Muriel Bowser on her Twitter. Philadelphia's Department of Public Health warned in a statement that during hot weather, never leave children and pets unattended in vehicles under any circumstances. Now, temperatures have also soared in Europe, setting a new all-time record in Britain, where the National Weather Service clocked 104.5 degrees in eastern England, surpassing the previous high set in 2019. Arian Celestino tells us how the weather is and their neck of the woods. Arian.
A fierce heat wave in Western Europe has left much of the continent wilting under a scorching sun, feeding ferocious wildfires and threatening to smash more temperature records on Tuesday.
It's freaking hot. It's like 40 degrees here in Brighton. It's 40 degrees. It was 37, which is usually not this hot. I'm from New Zealand and used to live in Australia, and so we're used to it being hot, but it's interesting at the moment.
The weather is an absolute scorcher. It's lovely, but you do need to get in the water. Obviously, stay hydrated. You know the drill. I work next door, so we've got in and out sort of thing going on. Because it's hot, you need to take a break, so it's beautiful.
I didn't really think it would ever get like this hot, like especially during this time, but I'm not really used to it. So like last year, I didn't really think the weather would be like this at all. And this year, like it's gotten so much more. I was supposed to go on holiday, but I kind of feel like I am in holiday.
In Britain, forecasters said the current national record of 38.7 degrees Celsius could be broken and 40 degrees Celsius breached for the first time, with experts blaming climate change and predicting more frequent extreme weather to come. On Monday, the 38.1 degrees Celsius recorded in Suffolk, in eastern England, made it the hottest day of the year and the third hottest day on record.
Enjoying the heat? No, absolutely not. I've not slept most of the night, and then it's just, there's just no reprieve from it. There doesn't seem to be any reprieve at all. It's not. It weren't so bad yesterday in the shade places, but today it's just too much.
The mercury hit 39.3 degrees Celsius in Brest on the Atlantic coast of Brittany in the far west of the country, smashing a previous record of 35.1 degrees Celsius from 2002. Ireland saw temperatures of 33 degrees Celsius in Dublin, the highest since 1887, while in the Netherlands, temperatures reached 35.4 degrees Celsius in the southern city of Westdorp. Although that was not a record, higher temperatures are expected there on Tuesday. The European heatwave is the second to engulf parts of the southwest of the continent in recent weeks. European Commission researchers, meanwhile, said nearly half, or 46% of EU territory, was exposed to warning level drought. 11% was at an alert level, and crops were already suffering from lack of water. In Britain, the government already on the ropes after a series of scandals that forced Prime Minister Boris Johnson to quit, has been accused of taking the situation too lightly. Johnson was criticized for having failed to attend an emergency meeting on the crisis on Sunday, instead hosting a farewell party at his state-founded country retreat. And medics condemned comments by Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab, who appeared to minimize the threat from the extreme heat when he told Britons to enjoy the sunshine. The extreme temperatures saw flights suspended at Luton Airport near London and at Royal Air Force Base Bryce Norton due to defects on the runway. Trains were cancelled and schools closed in affected areas.
Our train's been cancelled, and we have no alternative but to stay in London for another day.
It is what it is, isn't it? We can't change it. I've got 2 kids waiting for me at home. They're a bit upset that I might not get home tonight.
All the trains are cancelled due to heat, which I don't get it. They've got trains in Australia. They work. What's the problem here?
From London, United Kingdom, this is Arian Celestino. We live in extraordinary times.
The World Health Organization's European office said the heat wave baking Europe has cost over 1,700 deaths on the Iberian Peninsula alone, calling for joint action to tackle climate change. WHO Regional Director for Europe, Hans Klug, stressed that exposure to extreme heat often exacerbates pre-existing health conditions. And he noted that individuals at either end of life spectrum, infants and children and older people, are at particular risk. Responding to a query by AFP, WHO Europe explained that the figure is a preliminary estimate based on reports by national authorities and that the toll had already increased and will increase further over the coming days. The true number of deaths linked to the heat wave won't be known for weeks, he said, adding this scorching summer season is barely halfway done. And with temperatures expected to remain above normal until the middle of next week, the WMO, or World Meteorological Organization, warned that heat waves are and will occur more and more frequently. The pattern is linked to the observed warming of the planet that can be attributed to human activity, raising serious concerns for the planet's future. The pattern is linked to this. Let's listen in.
Today, we have actually already broken the all-time high in UK. There was 39.1 degrees at 11 o'clock, and we expect that the temperatures may go above 40 degrees today. We are expecting to see also major impacts on agriculture. During the previous heat waves in Europe, we lost big parts of harvest, and under the current situation where we are already having this global food crisis because of war in Ukraine, this heat wave is going to have further negative impact on agricultural activities. These kind of heat waves are becoming more and more frequent in the coming decades. The negative trend in climate will continue at least until 2060s, independent of our success in climate mitigation. We have already lost the game concerning melting of glaciers, so we expect that this melting of glaciers will continue for the coming hundreds of years or even coming thousands of years anyhow, and also sea level rise will continue for the same period. I'm happy to wear this kind of ties at these kind of events, which is demonstrating what we have seen happening in the climate for the past 150 years. So you can see that in the past we had much more blue color, and more recently we have seen more red color, which indicates that the heat waves have become more frequent.
Climate change is affecting our health in many, many ways, not only by the heat waves, which are a direct consequence in the number of diseases and conditions and death that is causing, but as well because it will be touching the pillars of our health, the access to food. We will not have a good agricultural production, access to water. There will be water scarcity for sure. 99% of the global population is breathing air that is not respecting the proposed standards by WHO, the air quality guidelines. The best solution to this will be, again, being very ambitious on tackling the causes of this global warming. We have been alerting for a long time that climate change is affecting very much human health, and therefore taking measures to reach the zero carbon and accelerating the transition to clean, renewable sources of energy.
The Department of Foreign Affairs said no Filipino casualty has so far been reported amid the blistering heat waves sweeping across Europe. DFA Deputy Assistant Secretary Gonar Musor said and noted that Philippine embassies and consulates in Europe continue to remind the local Filipino community to take the necessary precautions against the negative effects caused by the heat wave. Several parts of Europe have been suffering from sweltering heat waves and wildfires this month. causing air pollution in the continent to spike. In an advisory back on July 19, scientists of the Copernicus Atmosphere Monitoring Service predicted very high levels of surface ozone pollution across a large region of Europe as temperatures soared. The World Health Organization noted that degraded air quality poses a negative impact, particularly on vulnerable people. In other news, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have confirmed the first 2 U.S. cases of monkeypox in children. One is a toddler who lives in California. The other is an infant and is not a resident of the U.S. and was transiting through the Washington, D.C. area when the test was done. Children, especially those under 8 years old, are among those the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention warns are at especially increased risk for severe monkeypox disease. As of Friday, the CDC had tallied a total of 2,891 cases of monkeypox in the U.S. across 44 states, as well as the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. Now, this man from New York shares his experience on having monkeypox. Take a look.
Really have any pain. But I kept testing negative for COVID, and so I brought it up to my doctor that I was concerned that it could be the early stages of monkeypox. And he told me to just kind of wait and see because there are a lot of things that can cause flu-like symptoms. But after about 3 or 4 days of being feverish and things like that, I ended up developing the spots. So they'd started on my arms and my hands, and over the course of a day, they spread all over my body. So I had about 30 lesions develop at that point. So I had some lesions that were internal, not just on my skin, but also on my mucous membranes all over my body, basically. And those were the ones that were super painful. So before I started the medication and before I was able to get pain medication from my doctors, the pain was so severe for me that I basically was taking warm baths 6 or 7 times a day, just because that was the only thing that would make me feel better. It interrupted my sleep, which was really unfortunate. I was trying to rest up because I was sick, but the pain was keeping me awake. I just feel very frustrated by the response of the government to this outbreak, and I feel like a lot of suffering could have been prevented by having earlier access to vaccines. In the national stockpile, we have vaccines. We have millions of doses of the TPOXX treatment available, and months into this outbreak, we're still not really able to mobilize those resources. And as someone who had monkeypox and recovered from it, it just is super frustrating to see because I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through.
Spot here, you can see it's still kind of red.
Okay, hold that for a second.
The European Union's drug watchdog recommended for approval the use of a smallpox vaccine to treat monkeypox, which could be classified by the WHO as a global health emergency. Let's listen in.
The vaccine itself is actually the smallpox vaccine. The MVA-BN technology, which is our smallpox vaccine that has been approved for a long time, also got this indication back in 2019 for monkeypox. We have a annual capacity in our manufacturing site at approximately 30 million doses annually. So we can produce quite a lot of doses. We can, with the current demand, we can easily supply the global market. So it's a vaccine which is in stockpiles many places, in many countries, and it's a vaccine that can be used both if you are exposed. So if you are vaccinated a few days after you are exposed, you can also be protected. But you can also, of course, use the vaccine as a prophylactic vaccine, meaning before you are exposed to the disease, before you are exposed to monkeypox.
Imvanex, developed by Danish drug maker Bavarian Nordic, has been approved in the EU since 2013 for the prevention of smallpox. It was also considered a potential vaccine for monkeypox because of the similarity between the monkeypox virus and the smallpox virus. Monkeypox is less dangerous and contagious than smallpox, which was eradicated back in 1980. The first symptoms of monkeypox are fever, headaches, muscle pain, and back pain during the course of 5 days. Rashes subsequently appear on the face, the palms of hands, and soles of feet, followed by lesions, spots, and finally, scabs. Meanwhile, the Mayo Clinic laboratories can now test for monkeypox, the rare viral infection, using the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's orthopox virus test kit. For more, here's Rosel Feria from our Washington, D.C. Bureau.
Mayo Clinic Laboratories begins testing for monkeypox using the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC's orthopox virus test. The orthopox virus test detects most non-smallpox related orthopox viruses. This includes monkeypox. CDC Director Rochelle Walensky says the ability of commercial laboratories to test for monkeypox is necessary to combat the disease. Dr. Walensky says this will not only increase testing capacity, but also make it more convenient for providers and patients to access tests by using existing provider-to-laboratory networks. Mayo Clinic Laboratory offers this testing at its Division of Clinical Microbiology Laboratories in Rochester, Minnesota, and can accept specimens from anywhere in the country. Mayo Clinic Laboratories expects to perform up to 10,000 tests per week. On June 22, the Health and Human Services Department has announced that 5 commercial laboratory companies would soon begin offering monkeypox testing. Since then, CDC has shipped the test to the laboratories for administration, among other steps. CDC advises anyone with a rash that looks like monkeypox to talk to their healthcare provider about whether they need to get tested, even if they don't think they had contact with someone who had the disease.
But as you can see, 9,200 appointments went in about 7 minutes. So demand is significant. We think we have the technology now to manage that demand. But at the end of the day, it's about supply.
Healthcare providers nationwide can order the orthopox virus test from Mayo Clinic Laboratories just as they normally would order other tests. The public will not be able to go to Mayo Clinic Laboratory and submit a specimen. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Eagle News. We live in extraordinary times.
The directive to subject Filipino nationals to a daily coronavirus disease or COVID test in Macau is a purely health issue and should not be politicized. That is according to the Philippine Consulate General in Macau today. Today, the Macau government earlier ordered any resident who holds a Philippine passport to take a daily nucleic test from July 22 to the 24th. In an advisory, the consulate said the order is solely based on the volume of Filipinos who have caught the disease, which for the past 2 weeks make up 24.5% of the community infection in Macau. Now, to put this issue to rest, the Philippine Consulate General has expressed its agreement to the findings shared by the Macau Health Bureau that necessitates the issuance of a directive to our nationals in Macau. It said the consulate noted that the same directive had been imposed on other nationals from neighboring countries in the past, and it worked without anyone raising a discrimination issue out of it. A July 21 report by financial software, data, and media company Bloomberg quoted health official Leong Yek-yu as saying that Filipinos tend to have more gatherings like meeting among friends in Macau. About 30,000 Filipinos reside and work in Macau based on the latest data from the consulate. Back here in the country, the Department of Health said the National Capital Region is under moderate risk classification for COVID-19. The COVID-19 positivity rate in the National Capital Region, or Metro Manila, continues to rise, an indication that infections have not yet peaked in the region. That is according to Octa Research. Based on the graph shown by Octa Research Senior Fellow Dr. Guido David, Metro Manila's positivity rate was at 14.6% on July 20, up from 14% last July 15 and 12% last July 17. David said it is not yet clear what is driving the uptrend, and there is no telling when it will peak before it goes on a down curve. Now, DOH's Maria Rosario Vergere said the National Capital Region is now classified as moderate risk for COVID after its average daily attack rate hovered at 6.25 cases per 100,000 population. The news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam na. Sa Hulyo 25, mag-uulat sa bayan. Sa unang pagkakataon, si Pangulong Ferdinand Bongbong Romualdez Marcos Jr. Alamin ang mga ilalahad na polisiya, isusulong na panukala at plano ng Marcos administration sa loob ng 6 na taon. First State of the Nation Address. Mapapanood sa Net25 at mapapakinggan sa Radyo Agila DZEC 1062 kHz. Abangan din ng aming online updates sa Net25 Facebook, Twitter, YouTube at net25.com. First State of the Nation Address of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. on Net25 coverage.
Welcome back. President Bongbong Marcos Jr. has assured the Philippines will continue to have strong relations with the U.S. under his leadership. Marcos made the commitment when he received the credentials of Mary Kay Loss Carlson, U.S. Ambassador to the Philippines at the Malacanang Palace in Manila on Friday. To echo your commitment that the U.S. is committed to the Philippines is also committed to the U.S., committed to the continuing relationship between our two countries in the many dimensions and the multifaceted nature of our relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines, Marcos told Carlson. Marcos said the traditional ties between the Philippines and the U.S. continue to be deep and enduring. The Philippines and the U.S. established formal diplomatic relations on July 4, 1946, the day when the Philippines gained its status as an independent and sovereign state. Now, President Bongbong Marcos Jr. is very busy preparing for his first State of the Nation address, or SONA, which will be delivered at the Batasang Pambansa in Quezon City on Monday, July 25th. The President has opted to be hands-on as he is the one drafting his speech, according to Executive Secretary Victor Rodriguez in an interview with Palace reporters. Let's listen in.
Secretary Vic Rodriguez,
he's the one writing his SONA message, and he will be very busy. Yesterday, we tried to relax already his schedule so he can write, but ang dami pa ring mga trabaho. But this afternoon, he has devoted it until the weekend, until morning of Monday to finalize his SONA message. It's all about our economy, the economic plans, with the face-to-face opening of this coming school year. It's all about COVID response. It is his thrust, it is his vision for us not only to have food security, but food sovereignty, meaning we don't have to rely on much importation anymore.
The Philippine president delivers the SONA every year, usually held every last Monday of July, to report the state of the country, unveil the administration's agenda for the coming year, and ask Congress to pass priority legislative measures. The Presidential Security Group, PSG, is already in the final stages of preparation for Marcos' first SONA. Its Commander Colonel Ramon Zagala said Wednesday. Zagala said the PSG is heightening security measures to ensure the safety of Marcos, the first family, and all SONA attendees. And we go now to the U.S., where the investigating committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol Hill has accused former President Donald Trump of dereliction of duty for failing to call off the riot. Investigators drew on testimonies from top White House aides who described the president's inactions for nearly 3 hours during the assault on the Capitol. The committee's hearings have featured captivating footage showing film-like scenes of violence and recordings of officials giving behind-the-scenes descriptions of usually secret White House deliberations. The committee also examined the impact of a tweet Trump sent in December urging his supporters to descend on Washington on January 6. Members of right-wing militia groups, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and other Trump supporters saw the tweet from the president as a call to arms, according to lawmakers. The panel argued that Trump ordered a green light to the violence. The hearing also saw never-before-seen video showing the former President Trump refusing to say that the 2020 presidential election was over. The outtakes from his address, filmed on January 7 last year, show the president modifying his script. Let's listen in.
Whenever you're ready, sir.
I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack yesterday, and to those who broke the law, you will pay. You do not represent our movement, you do not represent our country, and if you broke the law, you can't say that. I already said you will pay. The demonstrators who infiltrated the Capitol have defied the seat of justice. It's defiled, right? See, I can't see it very well. Okay, I'll do this. I'm going to do this. Let's go. But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
But Congress is certified. Now Congress is
Yeah, right.
Now Congress
I didn't say over, so let me see. Go to the paragraph before. Okay? I would like to begin by addressing the heinous attack yesterday. Yesterday is a hard word for me.
Just take it out. The heinous attack.
Good. Take the word yesterday, because it doesn't work with the heinous attack on our country. Say on our country. Want to say that?
No, keep it.
My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote. My only goal was to ensure the integrity of the vote.
Meanwhile, former U.S. President Donald Trump held a rally in Arizona, dueling with his ex-wingman, Mike Pence, ahead of an upcoming Republican primary election. And there, Mr. Trump condemned the congressional hearing on the U.S. Capitol assault, saying he was being damaged in any form and called the testimonies total fiction. Let's listen in.
They want to damage me in any form so I can no longer represent you. They will damage me in any form they can. I watched this hoax last night where a young lady said, "Oh, I'm so heartbroken." But 3 weeks after January 6th, she wrote us a letter saying, "Oh, I loved working for the president." But think of it. What person would, I'm the president of the United States. And can you imagine this made-up story? It is total fiction. And I say thank God for the great people in the Secret Service, because they put out a statement that wasn't true. The people of Arizona Arizona are going to fire the radical left Democrats. You are going to elect a truly great woman who I've gotten to know very well, Carrie Lake, as your next governor. We're going to elect an incredible slate of America First Republicans up and down the ballot, and we are going to end crazy Nancy Pelosi's administration. You could take the 5 worst presidents in American history and put them together, and they would not have done the damage Joe Biden has done to our country in less than 2 years.
The Trump campaign for Carrie Lake, a far-right gubernatorial candidate who supports his false claim that the election was stolen, with his rivalry with Trump intensifying, former Vice President Mike Pence has positioned himself as a principled religious conservative, but he has declined to attack Trump directly. In a 20-minute speech before a seated warehouse crowd on Friday, he lauded policy accomplishments during the 4 years of the Trump-Pence administration and only took a brief swipe at Lake, criticizing her previous support of Democrats and initial opposition to Trump. Staying in the U.S., President Joe Biden's symptoms have improved and his key vital signs, including blood pressure, remain normal. That is according to his White House press secretary. Again, let's listen in.
Adhering to the CDC guidelines. President Biden completed his first full day of Paxlovid last night. His symptoms have improved. He did mount a temperature yesterday evening to 99.4 degrees Fahrenheit, which responded favorably to Tylenol. His temperature has remained normal since then. His symptoms remain characterized as runny nose and fatigue, with an occasional non-productive, now loose cough. His voice is deeper this morning. His pulse, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and oxygen saturation remain entirely normal.
You all saw just a few minutes ago, the president is doing better. He slept well last night. He ate his breakfast and lunch. He actually showed me his plate. Didn't ask about the menu, but I did see an empty plate with crumbs, and I have some guesses about what was there, but didn't ask. No comfort food? Didn't ask. I did ask him about his appetite. He joked that his one regret was that his appetite had not changed.
Hey, Mr. President, it's great to see you.
The highly transmissible Omicron BA.5 subvariant is currently fueling a new COVID wave in the United States, where hospitalizations have doubled in recent months, while President Biden is reported to be in good general health as the oldest U.S. president ever elected. His age heightens concern over the impact of COVID. Facing a punishing workload, Biden, like other presidents before him, had been showing the strain in recent months. His walk is stiffer, his hair thinner, and his speech less fluent than when he took office. And politically, Biden is in a tough phase of his presidency now, facing November midterm elections that are forecast to be painful for his Democratic Party, as well as declining personal approval ratings. Liz Truss, the favorite to become Britain's next prime minister, criticized rival Rishi Sunak over his tax policies, while finance minister, as the pair kicked off 6 weeks of campaigning. The former finance minister Sunak topped 5 ballots of Tory MPs over the last 8 days. Ashley Espiritu reports from our UK bureau. Ashley.
Rishi Sunak warned Conservatives Thursday that choosing leadership rival Liz Truss to be UK Prime Minister risks losing the next election to the Labour Party as he bids to overhaul her huge polling lead among Tories. Former Finance Minister Sunak topped 5 ballots of Tory MPs over the last 8 days to make a runoff against Foreign Secretary Truss, but now faces long odds to win the contest decided by party members. Several recent surveys of members, including a new YouGov poll, showed nearly 2/3 preferring Truss, with around 40% saying Sunak cannot be trusted after his resignation helped topple outgoing leader Boris Johnson. Also facing stinging criticism over his pledge to balance the books before cutting taxes, Sunak tried to go on the offensive over Truss's broader electability as the pair kick off 6 weeks of campaigning. Earlier, Truss again assailed Sunak's tax policies as the issue continues to dominate the week's odd contest. He has overseen various tax hikes as Britain battles to fix public finances after the coronavirus pandemic while being behind spiraling inflation. She wrote in the Daily Mail that Britain had been going in the wrong direction on tax, with the tax burden at its highest in 70 years, and promised to reverse recent rises.
What I would do immediately is reverse the national insurance rise. I would make sure we're not raising corporation tax, and I would have a temporary relief on the energy levy to cut people's fuel bills.
My number one economic priority will be tackling inflation and not making it worse, because inflation is the enemy that makes everybody poorer.
Rishi, you have raised taxes to the highest level in 70 years. That is not going to drive economic growth.
I'd love to stand here and say, look, I'll cut this tax, that tax, and another tax, and it will all be okay. But you know what? It won't. There's a cost to these things, the cost of higher inflation, higher mortgage rates, eroded savings. And you know what? This something-for-nothing economics isn't conservative, it's social.
This is Ashley Spiritu. We live in extraordinary times.
Back to the U.S., where the number of Americans applying for unemployment benefits last week rose to the highest level in more than 8 months. The unemployment rate remained 3.6% for a fourth straight month, matching a near 50-year low that was reached before the pandemic struck in early 2020. Here's Eli Austria from our Washington, D.C. bureau. Eli.
For those looking for work, these are good times. Lots of jobs are available. For some employers, though, it is a challenging time because of a shortage of workers with the skill sets they are looking for. In the healthcare and social assistance sectors, for example, there is a shortage of about 200,000 qualified workers. Sectors that showed hiring gains included the leisure and hospitality industries, food services, warehousing, and manufacturing. COVID-19 looms in the background, with nearly 4 million people deciding not to go to work because of the fear of becoming infected. Others opted to stay home to take care of at-risk family members. How long will the hiring binge continue? With inflation topping 9% in June, employers may start putting the brakes on hiring to protect their profit margins. As well, demand for goods and services may drop as prices continue to climb. And for those borrowing money, next month could see another big jump in interest rates, perhaps as much as 0.75%. Bottom line, even if you are employed, it's going to cost you more to live. Eli Austria, Los Angeles, California, Eagle News, we live in extraordinary times.
And the man accused of assassinating Japan's former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is set to undergo an examination of his mental condition around the time of the incident, according to local media. Abe was gunned down on the campaign trail on July 8 in the western city of Nara, 2 days before the country's upper house elections. His accuser, or his accused killer, Tetsuya Yamagami, is in custody and reportedly targeted Abe because he believed the former leader was linked to the Unification Church. On Friday, the Nara District Court approved a request by the local public prosecutor's office for a psychiatric examination of the 41-year-old Yamagami. The Asahi Shimbun and other local media reported, citing unnamed investigative sources. The examination is expected to wrap up in late November. Prosecutors will determine whether Yamagami can bear criminal liability based on the examination before making a decision on whether to indict him. In today's other news, flooding in southern Iran has killed at least 21 people and left others missing following heavy rainfall in the largely arid country. Estaban is 174 kilometers or 108 miles east of the provincial capital, Shiraz. The tragedy happened on a summer weekend in Iran when families tend to head to cooler areas such as riversides, lakesides, and valleys. Iran has endured repeated droughts over the past decade, but also regular floods, a phenomenon made worse when torrential rain falls on sun-baked earth. Photos released by Iran's Red Crescent Society showed rescuers walking on cracked, dry soil while others worked among reeds. In 2019, heavy inundations in the country's south left at least 76 people dead and caused damage estimated at more than $2 billion. Scientists say climate change amplifies extreme weather, including droughts, as well as the potential for the increased intensity of rainstorms. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Sa Hulyo 25, mag-uulat sa bayan. Sa unang pagkakataon, si Pangulong Ferdinand Bongbong Romualdez Marcos Jr. Alamin ang mga ilalahad na polisiya, isusulong na panukala at plano ng Marcos administration sa loob ng 6 na taon. First State of the Nation Address. Mapapanood sa Net25 at mapapakinggan sa Radyo Agila DZEC 1062 kHz. Abangan din ang aming online updates sa Net25 Facebook, Twitter, YouTube at net25.com. First State of the Nation Address of President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. on Net25 coverage.
Welcome back. The cast and crew of the forthcoming film adaptation of the legendary fantasy role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons unveiled their first images of the movie at the Comic-Con in San Diego. Take a look.
That was very much the appeal of the film for me, to be honest with you. When I got the script, I thought, I'm sure this isn't for me. And then I laughed and laughed. I think the two Johns are really funny screenwriters. And there was a lot of Monty Python-esque humor in it. Yes, so that's an absolutely vital element of this film.
No, agreed. That's, for me, was the big appeal, is that it had heart and it had humor, and a great combination in my book.
Script, because as a fan who wants this movie to be good, when I read it, I was afraid at first, and then I read the script and went, oh man, this is full of people I care about. This is full of so many laughs. This is full of so much compassion and so much endless adventure that anyone can plug into this. And that's just a relief all round. And now I'm just excited to share it the same way we did today.
You're scared to get into something that's so deep, because the world, you're talking about a good 40 years of IP, 40 years of living with audiences that love it around the world, people who really love playing the game, people who respect the game and respect the world, and really take it seriously. It's a big part of their lives.
I think, we made the movie very much for both fans and non-fans of the game. And so it doesn't require any prior knowledge. You could come in knowing nothing and have a great time. But if you do know it, we tried to be true to the lore and the rules. And so a lot of it, I think people who play will be gratified to see that.
You're bound to make enemies.
4-day comic book fantasy and sci-fi extravaganza by presenting the first look at its star-studded movie Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Chris Pine, Hugh Grant, and Ray J. Jim Page appeared on stage in the 6,000 capacity arena to discuss the movie's nostalgic and lighthearted take on the world's most popular role-playing game. Footage from the movie, out in March, showed a gang of wisecracking thieves raising corpses from the dead and being forced to race through a deadly maze pursued by monsters in front of a bloody, thirsty arena crowd. And streamer Amazon Prime unveiled the first images of its much-anticipated TV adaptation of Tolkien universe, Lord of the Rings of Power, at the Comic-Con in San Diego. Take a look.
Well, it's entirely different because we're in another age. We're in another world, essentially, much of which people have never seen, a lot of which, if not all of which. people have never seen. So that is the most exciting part of not only watching it but being involved in it. It's a hitherto untapped adaptation, which is really exciting.
But it's impossible to read Tolkien and watch the work translated to screen and not feel the resonance of what that means for us today, from refugees to people trying to find peace and unity and fellowship and understanding and what those challenges mean. Everybody can find something in Tolkien that they can relate to, particularly in our broken world today.
So I feel incredibly proud and excited for Amazon Studios to be able to open the floodgates for everyone, no matter what color or creed, to be able to come through and audition for the roles.
You know, all of us were a bunch of nerds and geeks, you know, and to be in the paradise of nerds and geeks with a bunch of other nerds and geeks, it was the best place. You could feel the love. You could feel the love. It was nerve-wracking because they're also the hardest critics, but I think people really took to it.
Comic-Con is taking place in person and at full 130,000 strong capacity again for the first time in 3 years after going online due to the pandemic. Amazon is reportedly spending more than $1 billion to make 5 seasons, each running for 10 hours, the first of which launches on its streaming platform September 2, and which reintroduces Tolkien's world of Middle-earth. According to McKay, the Rings of Power is going head-to-head at the event with HBO's Game of Thrones spin-off House of the Dragon, a rival fantasy series out next month. The series is said to be a personal obsession of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and represents the company's biggest play yet in the so-called streaming wars with rivals including Netflix and Disney+.
You have not seen what I've seen.
I have seen my share.
And finally in our news, is it tumbleweed or is it a piece of fishing line or spaghetti? Take a look at this tangled object discovered by NASA's Mars Perseverance rover has intrigued space watchers, leaving some musing tongue-in-cheek about the quality of Italian dining on the red planet. But the most plausible explanation is more prosaic. It's likely remnants of a component used to lower the robotic explorer to the Martian surface in February 2021. A spokesman for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory told AFP that they've been discussing where it's from, but there's been speculation that it is a piece of cord from the parachute or from the landing system that lowers the rover to the ground. The bundle of debris was first spotted on July 12 by the rover's front left hazard avoidance camera. But when Perseverance returned to the same spot 4 days later, it was gone. It was probably carried away by the wind, like a piece of a thermal blanket that might have come from the rocket-powered landing system, which was spotted last month. And as always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. This has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in extraordinary times. Good night.